The dining room glowed with soft gold light, the kind carefully designed to make everyone inside feel richer than they were. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors. Silverware lay perfectly aligned, each fork and knife placed with obsessive precision. The air carried a blend of expensive perfume, aged wine, and warm bread. It was a room built for quiet power, for murmured deals and confident laughter, for people who never checked prices before ordering. She moved through it silently, weaving between tables with a practiced balance that came from too many long shifts and too few breaks. Her black shoes made no sound against the floor. A tray rested on her palm like an extension of her arm, steady despite the weight of porcelain plates and glassware. She had learned early that grace was a form of armor. Smile softly. Speak politely. Don't react. Especially don't react. Her shift had started hours earlier. A double, because someone had called in sick. She hadn't complained. Complaining never changed anything. She needed the hours. Rent didn't wait. Neither did life. At the corner table near the floor-to-ceiling windows sat a man who seemed to own the space without trying. His suit was perfectly tailored, dark fabric hugging sharp lines. A watch glinted on his wrist, heavy and unmistakably expensive. He leaned back in his chair with the ease of someone used to being catered to, his voice carrying just enough authority to bend the air around him. She noticed him the moment she'd been assigned the table. Tables like that were always risky. Not because of what they ordered, but because of what they expected. She approached with a polite smile. "Good evening. May I take your drink order?" He barely glanced at her. "Sparkling water. Cold. Of course." When she returned, condensation clung to the glass, beads sliding slowly down its surface. She placed it gently beside his hand. "Please let me know if you need anything else." At first, everything was quiet. He spoke to the man across from him in low tones, words like margins and acquisitions slipping casually into the conversation. She refilled bread baskets, cleared plates, moved on. She hoped that would be the end of it. It wasn't. She was halfway across the room when his voice cut through the atmosphere, loud and sharp enough to slice conversations in half. "Hey!" She stopped instantly, heart tightening. Slowly she turned. "This," he said, lifting the glass between two fingers, "is warm." The word echoed. "Warm." "I'm sorry, sir," she said, already stepping closer. "I can replace it right away." His eyebrows lifted, disbelief curling into irritation. "Replace it? That's your solution?" "Yes, sir." He laughed, not amused, just loud. Heads turned. A woman at the next table paused mid-bite. A man near the bar glanced over his shoulder. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair, "this is exactly what I mean when I talk about standards slipping." Her pulse thudded in her ears. "I'll bring a fresh one immediately." "Do you even understand where you are?" he asked, voice rising. "This isn't some roadside diner." She felt the heat crawl up her neck but kept her expression neutral. "I understand, sir." "No, you don't." He set the glass down harder than necessary. "People like me don't come here for excuses." The room had gone quiet in that special way where everyone pretends not to listen while listening to every word. She could feel eyes on her back, measuring her reaction, waiting. "I apologize," she said softly. That should have been enough. It never was. "Apologies don't fix incompetence," he continued. "I spend more on dinner than you probably make in a month. The least you can do is get a drink right." Something inside her clenched. She swallowed it down. She had learned that swallowing was survival. "I'll get the manager," she said, already turning. "Oh no," he said quickly. "Stay right there." She stopped. "I want everyone to hear this," he said, gesturing vaguely around the room. "This is what happens when businesses stop caring about quality and start hiring based on sympathy." A ripple of discomfort passed through the tables. Someone shifted in their chair. Someone else stared determinedly at their plate. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides. She focused on breathing evenly. In. Out. I followed the service guidelines, she said quietly. He scoffed. Guidelines? Don't talk back to me. I wasn't. Enough. His tone was sharp, final. You're here to serve, not explain. The word hung between them. Serve. She nodded once. Yes, sir. The manager hurried over then, face pale, hands clasped. Is there a problem? This, the man said, pointing at her without looking away, is the problem. I'm so sorry, the manager said quickly. We'll take care of it immediately. I should hope so, the man replied. Because I don't tolerate disrespect or incompetence. Disrespect. The irony pressed against her chest. The manager turned to her, eyes pleading. Go get a fresh one. She picked up the glass, careful not to let her hand shake. As she turned away, she heard him laugh again, low and satisfied. Unbelievable, he muttered. They let anyone in here these days. She walked toward the service station, every step heavy. In the kitchen, noise exploded, clattering plates, shouted orders, steam hissing from machines. She set the glass down and stared at it for a moment, watching the remaining ice melt into water. Her reflection stared back at her in the stainless steel surface, calm face, tired eyes. She straightened her shoulders. She had faced worse. Much worse. She poured a new drink, colder this time, ice cracking sharply. She wiped the glass, arranged it on the tray, and took one steady breath. When she returned, the room was watching again. She placed the glass gently on the table. Here you are, sir. He didn't touch it. He looked at her like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. See? He said loudly to no one in particular. Not that hard, is it? She held his gaze for half a second longer than necessary. Not defiant. Just present. Is there anything else I can do for you? She asked. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. Yeah. You can learn your place. The words landed heavy and deliberate. Something shifted then. Not in the room. In her. She didn't respond immediately. She didn't look away either. The silence stretched, thin and fragile, pulling everyone's attention tighter. And for the first time since he'd raised his voice, uncertainty flickered across his face. She inhaled slowly. No, she said quietly. The single word slipped out before she could stop it, calm and controlled. The room froze. The word lingered in the air longer than it should have. No. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it landed like a dropped plate in a silent room. For a moment, no one moved. The man blinked, clearly certain he'd misheard. What did you just say? She stood straight, shoulders squared, hands calm at her sides. I said no, sir. A murmur rippled through the restaurant, quick and hushed. A woman near the window inhaled sharply. Somewhere behind the bar, a glass stopped mid-polish. The man's expression hardened, surprise curdling into anger. You don't get to say no to me. She met his stare, steady and unflinching. I do when it comes to being spoken to that way. The manager stiffened, eyes darting between them. Let's all take a breath, he said carefully, voice low. We can resolve this. Stay out of it. The man snapped, never looking away from her. This is between me and your staff. Her staff. As if she were an object, an extension of furniture. He pushed his chair back slightly, leaning forward now, elbows on the table. You think you can disrespect me in my own city? She didn't answer right away. She felt her heartbeat in her throat, felt the familiar tug of caution urging her to retreat, to smooth things over, to survive the moment. Years of training whispered in her ear. Keep your head down. Don't escalate. This is how you lose jobs. But something had already broken loose, and she knew she couldn't put it back. I haven't disrespected you, she said evenly. I offered to fix a mistake. A mistake? He laughed, sharp and humorless. You are the mistake. A few people gasped. Someone muttered, Jesus. The manager's jaw tightened. She felt the words strike, felt their weight press into old places she rarely allowed herself to feel during work hours. Still, she didn't flinch. "I brought you a cold drink," she said. "Twice. That's your job," he shot back. "You don't get a medal for doing the bare minimum." His voice had risen again, booming now, feeding on the attention. He loved this part. Loved the way rooms bent toward him, the way people shrank. "You know how many restaurants beg for my business?" he continued. "How many people would kill to be in your position?" Her lips curved slightly, not a smile, not quite. "I know exactly where I am." "Oh, do you?" His eyes narrowed. "Then you should understand what happens when people forget their place." The words drew a sharp line through the room. A line between those who could afford to look away and those who couldn't. The manager stepped closer to her side. "Sir," he said, firmer now, "we won't tolerate harassment of our staff." The man scoffed. "Harassment? I'm giving feedback." She turned her head just enough to glance at the manager. "It's okay." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded once. "I am." The man noticed the exchange and smirked. "See? Even he knows when to step aside." She turned back to him slowly. "You're confusing silence with agreement." That did it. His chair scraped loudly as he stood, towering over the table now, commanding attention without asking for it. "You have no idea who you're talking to." She looked up at him, unfazed. "Then tell me." He laughed again, louder than before. "I don't need to. People know." A pause. Then she spoke carefully. "Respectfully, sir, the way you're behaving right now." "Stop," he barked. "Do not lecture me." "I'm not," she replied. "I'm setting a boundary." The word boundary seemed to enrage him more than any insult could have. "A boundary?" he repeated incredulously. "You're a waitress." The word hit the room like a slap. "Yes," she said. "And I'm still a person." A hush fell. Even the kitchen noise seemed to dull, as if the building itself were listening. He stared at her, jaw tight, eyes calculating. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe," she said quietly. "But not for the reasons you think." The manager cleared his throat. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice." The man ignored him. "You think this is bravery? Talking back because you think the crowd's on your side?" She glanced around, taking in the faces watching them. Some were uncomfortable. Some were sympathetic. Some were waiting to see who would win. "This isn't about them," she said. "And it's not about you either." That caught his attention. "Then what is it about?" She hesitated. Just a second. Long enough for the room to lean in again. "It's about how easy it is for people with power to forget that other people exist," she said. "And how dangerous that is." His laugh this time was colder. "You sound bitter." "I sound honest." He shook his head slowly. "I could have you fired with one phone call." The manager stiffened. "Sir?" She raised a hand, gently stopping him. "If that's what you choose to do." The man's eyes flicked to the manager, then back to her. "You think you're untouchable?" "No," she said. "I think I'm done being quiet." The words echoed in the silence that followed. He looked around, gauging the room, the witnesses. He could feel the shift, the way the air no longer bent entirely to him. That made him uneasy. "You're making a scene," he said finally. She nodded. "You already did." A few people chuckled nervously. Someone near the bar let out a breath they'd been holding. His face darkened. "This restaurant will regret hiring you." She didn't respond immediately. She reached down, straightened the edge of the tablecloth he'd disturbed, a small, deliberate gesture. Then she looked back up at him. "Sir," she said calmly, "I need you to decide something." "Oh?" he sneered. "And what's that?" "Whether you want to leave with your dignity," she said, "or without it." The challenge hung there, sharp and unmistakable. The man stared at her, eyes narrowing, anger battling curiosity. The room waited, suspended between what had already been said and what was about to come. She took a slow breath. And for the first time since he'd raised his voice, he wasn't sure who held the power anymore. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, then dangerous. The kind of silence where every breath felt too loud, where even the clink of ice inside a glass seemed like an interruption. The man stayed standing, one hand resting on the table as if anchoring himself, the other hanging loosely at his side. His confidence hadn't vanished, but it had cracked, and cracks have a way of spreading. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as though intimacy would restore control. You think you've won something here? She didn't step back. This isn't a competition. That's where you're wrong, he said. Everything is. She studied him for a moment, not with anger, but with something closer to curiosity. Is that how you justify it? Justify what? Treating people like this. His jaw tightened. I don't owe you an explanation. No, she agreed. You don't. That answer seemed to disarm him more than resistance would have. He straightened slightly, eyes narrowing again. Then why are you still standing here? She took a breath, slow and steady. She was aware of the room again, the weight of attention, the held breaths, the subtle shift in posture from passive spectators to witnesses. She knew that whatever happened next would travel. Phones were already angled, screens glowing faintly. I stayed, she said, because you assumed something about me. He laughed once, sharp. I assumed you were bad at your job. She shook her head gently. You assumed I was small. That landed harder than she expected. His mouth opened as if to respond, then closed again. He glanced around, checking the reactions, recalculating. And what if I did? He said finally. So what? So people who assume they're bigger than everyone else tend to miss what's right in front of them, she replied. The manager shifted beside her, unease etched into his face. Maybe we should move this conversation somewhere private. No, the man said quickly. I want this handled here. She met the manager's eyes briefly, then nodded. It's fine. The man's expression flickered. Confident. Honest. He exhaled slowly through his nose. You're enjoying this. I'm not, she said. But I'm not afraid of it either. That gave him pause. He looked at her again, really looked this time, as if searching for the angle he'd missed. You don't act like someone who needs this job. She smiled faintly. That's because I don't. The murmur that followed was immediate. Louder this time. Heads turned fully now, no longer pretending. The man stiffened. Excuse me? She reached into her apron slowly, deliberately, every movement controlled. Not theatrical, just precise. She pulled out her phone and unlocked it with a single tap. The screen lit her face briefly as she turned it toward him. I said I don't need this job, she repeated calmly. He glanced at the screen, then scoffed. You think showing me your phone proves something? I think, she said, that you should look again. His eyes dropped back to the display. The change was subtle at first, a tightening around his eyes, a flicker of confusion. Then recognition struck, sharp and unmistakable. His face drained of color. No, he said quietly. That's not. She turned the phone slightly so the manager could see. His eyes widened instantly. That logo, he whispered. Your. She nodded once. The man took the phone from her hand without asking, staring at the screen as if it might change. The company name was there, unmistakable. A name he knew well. A name that had signed contracts, negotiated terms, set conditions. That's impossible, he said, voice suddenly thin. You're lying. She held out her hand. You can check the board listing. Or the last contract addendum. My signature's on it. A bead of sweat appeared at his temple. Then why are you dressed like this? She finished. Because I chose to be. The room erupted into whispers now, no longer restrained. Someone near the back let out a soft laugh of disbelief. Another person raised their phone higher. The manager straightened fully, shock giving way to something like respect. You asked to rotate through front of house, he said slowly. I thought it was for training. It was, she replied. Just not for me. The man handed the phone back as if it burned. This is a setup. It's not, she said. It's a mirror. He shook his head, backing away a step. You humiliated me. She tilted her head. You humiliated yourself. I only stopped you from doing it quietly. His voice rose again, but the authority was gone, replaced by panic. You had no right. I had every right, she said. You spoke to me based on what you thought I was worth. I didn't know. That's the point. The words cut clean and deep. He looked around desperately now, seeing the room not as an audience to command, but as a jury. The power he'd walked in with had slipped through his fingers without him noticing. So what? He said, grasping for footing. You're proving a lesson? No, she replied. I'm setting a standard. The manager swallowed. Sir, he said carefully, perhaps it would be best if. The man raised a hand, silencing him. His gaze locked back onto her. You could destroy my reputation with this. She considered him for a long moment. I could. And I won't, she said. Not unless you give me a reason. The tension tightened again, but this time it leaned in her favor. The room sensed it. The turning point wasn't loud. It was complete. He looked smaller now, his posture less rigid, his certainty gone. What do you want? She didn't answer immediately. She glanced around the room, at the servers hovering at the edges, at the guests who had watched without intervening, at the manager who had almost asked her to step aside. I want you to apologize, she said at last. Not to me. To everyone you think you're better than. His mouth opened. Closed. He had never done that in his life. And if I don't? He asked. She smiled, soft but unwavering. Then this ends very differently. The room held its breath. For the first time that night, the man realized he wasn't standing on a stage. He was standing on the edge of a choice. The choice hung heavy between them, thicker than the silence that followed. It pressed against his chest, against his pride, against the version of himself he had spent decades protecting. He looked around again, slower this time, as if hoping the room might rearrange itself back into something familiar. It didn't. The people were still watching. The phones were still raised. The power had already shifted, and no amount of money could buy it back in that moment. His jaw worked as he swallowed. You're enjoying this, he said, but the accusation sounded hollow now, more like self-defense than certainty. She shook her head once. I'm ending it. He let out a breath that trembled despite his effort to control it. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand exactly what I'm asking, she replied. I've understood it my whole life. The manager stood rigid beside her, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The servers nearby had stopped pretending to work. Even the kitchen doorway had filled with faces peering out, drawn by the gravity of what was unfolding. The man straightened his jacket, a reflexive gesture, muscle memory from a lifetime of boardrooms and cameras. If I apologize, he said carefully, this will follow me. She met his eyes without blinking. So will the way you spoke to me. A flicker of anger rose again, brief and weak. People expect strength from me. No, she said softly. They expect silence from people like me. That's the difference. The room seemed to exhale as one. The truth of it settled everywhere at once, undeniable. He glanced at the door, calculating escape, but he knew leaving now would only confirm what everyone already saw. His shoulders sagged slightly, the first visible crack in the armor. What do you want me to say? He asked. She didn't hesitate. Say you were wrong. His lips parted. Closed. He looked like a man trying to speak a language he'd never bothered to learn. I was wrong, he said finally, the words stiff, awkward. A low murmur spread through the room, disappointment mixed with disbelief. She didn't react. Louder, she said, not unkindly. This isn't just for me. He flinched. For a brief second, it seemed like he might explode again, retreat into anger. Instead, he turned slowly to face the room. I was wrong, he repeated, voice louder now, uneven. I spoke out of line. His gaze flicked back to her, almost pleading. I shouldn't have said what I said. She waited. I shouldn't have assumed, he added, or spoken to you the way I did. The words landed differently this time. Real. Exposed. She nodded once. Thank you? The simplicity of it stunned him. No victory speech. No humiliation. Just acknowledgement. He stood there for a moment longer, uncertain, then turned abruptly and grabbed his coat from the back of the chair. The scrape of it against the fabric sounded too loud in the quiet room. I'm leaving, he muttered. No one tried to stop him. As he walked toward the exit, conversations didn't resume. The silence followed him all the way to the door. When it closed behind him, the sound echoed like punctuation. For a beat, nothing happened. Then someone clapped. One person. Then another. Then more. The applause spread, tentative at first, then growing, filling the space with something warm and electric. Not triumphant, not mocking. Affirming. She stood still, unsure where to put her hands, her face flushing despite herself. She hadn't planned for this part. The manager stepped forward. Everyone, he said, voice thick. Thank you. We'll take a moment. The clapping faded into murmurs, then into something like relief. People returned to their tables, though many kept glancing her way, expressions softer now. A server beside her whispered, That was incredible. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It was exhausting. The manager turned to her fully, eyes shining. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to see, she said simply. What would happen if no one knew? And? He asked. She looked around the room, the polished floors, the quiet wealth, the invisible lines drawn between people. Now I know. He nodded slowly. You don't have to stay. I know, she said. But will you? She considered the question. Thought about the looks she'd endured, the moments she'd swallowed, the ones she hadn't. Thought about the servers who had watched her stand her ground and seen what was possible. For tonight, she said. Yes. The rest of the shift passed differently. Lighter. People spoke to her with care, with curiosity, some with embarrassment. She accepted it all without comment. When the last table left and the lights dimmed, she untied her apron and folded it neatly, the same way she always did. Outside, the night air was cool against her skin. The city hummed, indifferent and alive. She stood for a moment beneath the glow of the streetlight, listening to the distant traffic, feeling the steady rhythm of her own breath. Her phone buzzed. A message. Then another. News traveled fast. She slipped the phone into her pocket without looking. Tomorrow, she would return to boardrooms, contracts, decisions that moved numbers and names. Tomorrow, people would treat her differently again. But tonight belonged to this version of her. The one who had stood still in a room built to shrink her and refused to bend. As she walked away, her steps light and unhurried, one thought settled quietly in her chest, clear and unshakable. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it only needs one sentence.